Welcome everyone to the RtG Baseball Podcast, where we travel down the road to glory 1 week at a time. We're going to break down the week that was in fantasy, check out the leaders in the league, and then pivot to this week's IRL Baseball Topic, which I'll keep a mystery for now. You're going to want to check this one out. I'm your host and commissioner, Coach Will. And I'm joined tonight by your resident Red Sox fan and serial third place finisher, Coach Andrew.
Happy Mother's Day, Will.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. But we're not alone this time. We have another guest, another longtime member of the league, and currently one of your top 2 teams in the league. I give you Coach Nate.
Hey, how you guys doing?
How you doing? We're good. How's it been?
Doing well. Busy, but good busy. But excited to talk some baseball.
Always. And remind us, you are a loyal supporter of which franchise again?
The Cleveland Guardians.
The Guards. Let's sprinkle in IRL baseball immediately. How you feel about your Guards so far?
Yeah, so far record is pretty solid. Run differential doesn't look so good, but don't pay attention to that. We've had a lot of basically if we win a close game. When we lose, we just get blown out and use the guys at the back end of the bullpen. So the run differential looks a little rough, but we're a couple games out of first and playing pretty competitively and hopefully expecting a couple guys to return from the IL pretty soon.
That's funny. We are quite the opposite. We lose close games, and when we win, we smash our opponent to pieces. So we have a very positive run differential, funny enough.
Yeah, our run differential right now, I believe, is about the same as the White Sox, but complete opposite ends of the division.
Yeah, it is tough. But like many of the other teams in the American League, still very much in it.
Absolutely.
Now, this is a special Sunday edition in terms of record date of the RtG Baseball podcasts. So we're going to take a walk around the league as it is Sunday evening. Most matchups, you could say within reasonable doubt, are complete, but there are a few that are clearly coming down to the wire. And none closer than Jamie and Eric. Both of these teams are projected within a point of each other, with really one game left to happen and a couple games in progress right now. Before we get into it, I have something special. So I have crunched the numbers, and I can tell you through the first 5 matchups, the average score of every team. So the average total has been 543.9. It's basically 544. That adjusts for the first matchup. Like it transforms that number into what would have happened if it was a 7-day matchup as well. So hypothetically, you could say scoring above 544 is good. Scoring below 544 is bad. And technically, this Eric and Jamie matchup, if the projections turn out to be true, they will both score over that 544 matchup, which is good for them.
Yeah, looking at the projections this week, I expect that average to grow a little bit because we got a bunch of high-scoring games going on here.
And I agree. I did throw in some adjustments though, so you can tell me if you care about any of these. I did do an average where the highest score every week is omitted. And by that, so hypothetically taking out the outliers in like huge weeks, that would drop the average to 527. And then I did the opposite too, of eliminating the lowest score every week. That would raise the average to 560, which kind of makes sense in your head. That's like within the two sides of 544. Uh, so hypothetically, there was a time when we kind of floated where like it was a nice round number of 500 being the average. Just easy to think about, but that's the more like with facts-based evidence here. Something from 525 to 560 seems to be your target right now. And actually looking at uh Eric here, he is this is a bit of a lost opportunity for him. He had the chance to pull ahead with his two-start week pitcher, Luis Severino, who has lost points for him today. That's always the worst feeling. Like you have a lead, but because your pitcher still has another start, they actually lose you points in your second start. That is tough.
And
What really stings oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
oh no, you go.
So what really stings too is when you're on the fence between a pretty solid
Ow.
pitcher who's only got one start and one who's maybe not quite as good, but is lined up for the two starts. So you roll the dice on the two, and then he completely fumbles one. And then, of course, naturally, your other pitcher goes off on the bench. And that's just life in fantasy baseball.
Oh yeah. Uh, has that been a we actually briefly talked about this last week. Do you have Nate, do you have a like Sunday routine of like deciding which two start pitchers to target or something similar, or are you more just letting your roster ride with what you got?
So usually I keep one pitcher slot, in my brain for just cycling through, okay, who's a two start pitcher for next week. And then at some point mid to back half of the week when, it's taken into account rain delays or anything like that, and should be a pretty accurate projection for who's going to be two starts and who isn't, is when I'll roll the dice on a pitcher or two to get in there.
So you're saying like you have a roster spot, like a person who you intend to drop this week for a two-star pitcher, and then that person drop for another two-star pitcher?
Correct. Yep. Every week I'll pick up someone,
Okay.
drop them. If they do really well, maybe I'll consider keeping them and looking at my roster to see if someone else.
Yeah. So that's an interesting tournament. So in a way, you actually like it would be a negative to have five superb pitchers because then you might not drop any of them for a two-star pitcher.
Yep. But I factor that into my draft strategy. So I save a pitching spot for the very end, knowing that whomever I take is probably going to end up being dropped and I can focus on other positions throughout the draft.
Gotcha. Uh, and I kind of do similar, or at least, or maybe there's some weeks where, because I try to do that for hitters too. I guess it depends if you built your team more offensively or built it defense, but pitching wise. Because you could do the same thing for hitters too. You could say like, oh, I'm gonna uh swap out my utility player every single week by adding him. But of course, this came up a couple episodes ago. Like I don't like, at least in my case, and for some other people's case, I don't have a free utility spot because I have two first basemen that I'm almost always should always be starting.
Yeah, and I think you can get yourself into trouble too if you try to get too cute you know, with some of that stuff. At the end of the day, I think just accumulating the best talent that you possibly can is just going to be your best bet. If the you know for pitching, if the two starts line up for a given matchup, that's great. Um, but you can easily get burned if you try to play the matchups, too closely.
I live the tightrope of potentially getting burned then because I actually like I'll scout too. So you can so more tutorials. So again, if someone's listening and they want to have the CBS website open right now, you could follow along here. If you are on the website and you hover over scores, you can then click on scoring preview. That's your opponent in the next week, and you can kind of scroll down to see like if you're going against a competitive team or not. But you could
Yes,
potentially use this as well to
slats.
try to
Try it.
deduce their
Yeah.
number of starts. You can do something similar if you go to your team. It's like click on my team, so that's your roster, and then click your name and switch to another team. Then you could also see like, I mean, you don't know if that's the roster going to go with, but you can kind of be like, oh, they have the chance to throw 10 starts against me, which that would mean like 4 two-start pitchers, which would be pretty insane, but it's possible. And then if there's a lot, you can go on that. Like if like maybe you think you're overmatched anyway, and you don't even try to like like add two-start pitchers, or it's gonna like you think like, oh, I gotta catch up to them, so let me add like 3 of the worst pitchers in baseball, but those pitchers have two starts this week. So I'm usually living and dying with that. But yeah, back to the uh our close matchup for Jamie and Eric. It does look like on both sides uh pretty balanced weeks, except of all people, Ryan McMahon for Jamie, an insane week, scoring 90 points so far. If you're on the website and you're looking at someone's score and you like click on the number, like the points, you would see how they got those points. And one of the rows is WOBA. So Ryan McMahon this week is a 690 WOBA. The greatest player in all of history. First round Hall of Famer, unanimous in terms of his week. So and also his catcher, hang on, Wilson Contreras, not William Contreras, has also had a great week as well. Do either of you find yourself caring about catchers? Because this catcher advantage plus that awesome Brian McMahon week is what has kept Jamie in this matchup right now, and has him in the lead right now.
Yeah, I feel like catchers in fantasy baseball can actually be pretty similar to like tight ends in fantasy football, where there's a very clear top echelon. So you either spend that draft capital on a really good one, or you save it towards the end and you get someone who's kind of middle of the road, knowing that it's not going to be a standout position for you. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a huge advantage, but that's definitely a game of uh, seeing how things go in the draft. And I think you have to just almost go into the draft, saying this is the point at which I'm willing to commit to a catcher, and I'm not going to commit before then. Even though it's an advantage, it just in terms of value, um, it's great to have, but um, at least that's how I approach it. Um, I think it can be a mistake to overcommit, too
Like I
early.
like here's the dichotomy here. So the number one catcher right now is Cal Raleigh by Nick, and he is way ahead of everyone else. But the number two catcher is Eric's catcher, Carson Kelly, and even like number five, number 4, 5, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all like within 20 of each other. And number 5, there's the Rockies catcher who might actually play outfield right now, Hunter Goodman. Like, he probably wasn't drafted. I could double check that.
Well,
So
another thing
that
too is, just because they're the top catcher doesn't mean that's necessarily what the projections, exactly mapped out going into the season.
well, yeah,
Like
yeah,
the
that's what I'm
drop
getting
off
at
can be
exactly.
so quick, in terms of the so-called cliff, with catchers, you can be great one season, then the next, like that's it. Like they're not the offensive force they once were. So it's risky. But if it, it can pay off if you time it right.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, the catcher's tough because if it's a great feeling when I do spend my draft capital on him, and he does give me the competitive advantage every week, and, like, I can see the results and he's consistent. I never have to worry about adding catchers from free agency or anything. It's good. But on the other hand, there's I have someone I think he's ranked like number 4 or 5, like, preseason ranking, the Astros catcher, Yanner Diaz, and he's, like I think he's the worst of all the catchers that are owned right now. But I'm fighting against my sunk cost of, like I could either get rid of him, A, or, like, bench him and get another catcher, uh, but, like, I drafted him, like, higher than just let's just say, like, middle round, so I wanna give up on him. Meanwhile, someone, like, added a catcher from free agency 2 weeks ago, and he's doing great. Uh, so it's a conundrum. Hopefully, I'm basically going with it's a long season strategy, and surely it'll all, like, balance out to be in my advantage.
Yep, I ended up getting my catchers, you know, the reasonable, kind of middle part of the draft there. But I think both of mine are guys with big names. But this year they've not had the statistics to back up the names, that being Sean Murphy and Adley Rutschman. Um, definitely people that baseball fans know, but in the fantasy department, they're certainly not in the top 10. Maybe in the top 20.
What are your thoughts on Adley? Uh, you know, Will and I have had the opportunity to go to some Orioles games, and he was someone who's you know the hype was you know pretty big when he came out of the scene, and it seems like the last couple months, year, he's he hasn't quite lived up to that hype. Do you think that's uh, who he is now, or is it just a long slump like that? I can't quite get a read on that one.
Yeah, that's a really great point. He hasn't been the perennial all-star maybe that a lot of those Oriole prospects were projected to be. He's not the only Oriole, from their farm system who's been,
Sure.
good but not great. Um, but at the same time, he's been routine looking at his stats from the last couple years. If you tell someone, hey, your catcher's gonna hit 250, about 20 homers, um,
A lot of
decent
teams
on
will take that.
base. A lot of teams will take that, absolutely. But to your point, yeah, the
That's
level
not
of hype
the
that he had.
that's not the
Um,
Buster Posey-esque, you know,
exactly.
type
Um,
performance I think
I
a lot of
know.
people were expecting.
Yeah, personally, he's a hilarious guy. He's a big fan of the sketch series I Think You Should Leave, which is very near and dear to my heart. So I make sure to keep track of his social media and all the funny stuff he's got going on. Um, but yes, output wise this year, yeah, 195, 294 on base, 4 homers. Hopefully he'll be able to kick it into gear at some point here soon.
See, the real question, the fantasy question is, especially you who have another catcher on the roster, is there any like how long does this have to continue before he doesn't deserve a spot on your roster anymore?
Yeah, so I mean, he has been benched for Sean Murphy. He was my starting catcher. Adley was to start the year, and I just couldn't put up with that anymore. I mean, Sean Murphy really hasn't been doing much else to, help at that to this point. But we'll continue to kind of monitor it by play by play, see how it's going. And part of it may just be if we start going into a tailspin because we lost last week. This week's is gonna be close. So if all of a sudden the roster looks like it needs a change, then I just gotta evaluate the contributors and see what's going next. But the worst thing that I've fallen victim to in the past is being too hasty, and then I drop him, someone else picks him up, and he gets hot. So I try to be mindful of that 'cause I certainly don't want to fall into that with someone like Rutschman.
Adley seems like a prime candidate for a situation like that. You know,
Absolutely.
you're either gonna act too quickly or too late, and you might not know until it's long after you should have made that decision.
Hmm. Yeah, if I
You know,
hang
you're
on
just
to
kinda
him, he's gonna bat, 215 for the season. If I let him go, he's gonna hit 30 home runs and, be a late all-star.
Absolutely. Seems like a good time to go into our other close matchup right now, which, as it happens, is yours, Mr. Nate. So right now, uh, you are down about 100 to Team Mighty Taco, Coach Show, but you have the two starting pitchers remaining to his none. In fact, it looks like he might only have one other opportunity for points. Actually, nope, I take it back because Aaron Judge is playing unless they took him out already. So that's a danger. That's always a danger. 3 for 4 Judge today is again. Uh, but once that Yankees and Athletics game is done, it's only the last game of the week, which you have both pitchers for. So give it to us. Are you gonna complete the comeback?
Well, I just have to hope for a 1-0 or 2-0 game because in addition to having both Luis Ortiz and Zach Wheeler, I also do have Jose Ramirez in my lineup as well. So, yeah, I just need it to be
Oh,
like
okay.
2-0 with Jose going deep twice and everyone else just striking out in every at-bats.
fascinating set of competing rooting interests here.
Yes.
That's very funny. But okay, but you got Cade Smith too, so you could
Yep.
potentially. I mean, there's a combination of events that gets you a whole lot of points here.
Yes, and a combination of events that loses me or negates me a whole lot of points as well.
See, this is the stuff that gets lost, and I mean, this is all sports all the time. But like the the CBS projections help you say, "Oh, this is a close matchup right now. You're projected to be within 20 points of show when it's all said and done." But but that's right now, quarter 6 Eastern time. If Zach Wheeler and Luis Ortiz get crushed here and allow home runs, you'll probably end up losing by like 80, and people forget that it was ever close.
Exactly. No.
Do you ever have those feelings? At least and specifically in the fantasy world of like the whole week you thought it was going to be close, and then you turn on the phone like Monday morning and oh, you got crushed.
Oh, yeah, I've run into that. Fantasy baseball, fantasy football, it's looking real close, and then just one thing goes sideways or someone pops off for the other team. You were saying what? It's like 430 to 400, or excuse me, 530 to 560 is the average of what you're looking for.
Yeah, so
Shows at
far it has
660.
been.
I'm at about 550, so assuming that I don't completely implode, um, we're both gonna surpass that, but someone's gotta win and someone's gotta lose.
That's why the projections also can only take you so far.
Yeah, so
It's
you're right, Andrew. There's a argument for and against the projections. I was kind of arguing for the projections. So like that helps you know that hey, like I was on pace 6 days into the matchup for this to be close, and that might make me feel better even if I get crushed on the 7th day. On the other hand, maybe there's like if that happens every time, you go 0 for 22 the entire season, then it might feel nice that you were close, but if you lost, you lost. Um, and oh no. So I had I had skipped housekeeping this week because I didn't really feel like talking about the Rockies. Uh, However, it seems that Rockies news has appeared as reported by our co-host. So take it away, Sir Nate.
Yeah, so just coming through here, Bud Black has been relieved of his duties as Rockies manager after their 7-33 start. The weird thing about this, the Rockies won today.
Well, that's nice. At least
So
they won. Wow, like, you finally win, you're
yeah,
happy for, like, an hour, and it's like, "Oh, by the way,
front
Mr.
office
Black,
couldn't have
you're."
waited a day if they lose tomorrow, let them out on a loss.
Man, I mean, this is another situation. But Bud Blackstock, he has been there for a while, no? Like,
Yes.
It's
Um,
just
he
always, in situations like there's definitely cases where it's like, okay, you can probably place some blame on the manager, and maybe that's also the case here. But with a team like the Rockies, or a team like the White Sox, it's so clearly that is that the roster just isn't it's not it, and such a blatant, you know, you know, scapegoating situation. I don't know. Th- I'm always amused by
but 9 years. This is like how I feel like Aaron Boone, even Brian Cashman, after all this time, like, you I'd be so frustrated as a Rockies fan. Like, on top of everything else being horrible, we also have had the same manager for almost 10 years.
yep. Herman Marquez today went 7 innings, allowed 1 run on 3 hits to lower his ERA to 8.27.
yeah.
Ah, mm, it's not what you want to see there.
I
Uh,
was reading at this point last year, even the White Sox from last year, 40 games in, at least had they were 11-29, so they at least looked a little bit better on paper.
I can't believe, like, I was pretty confident backing the Rockies just because I was not betting on the worst professional season of sports ever had, and yet that is what they've been giving us so far. But you know what? Maybe they'll name somebody new the manager, if not already. Maybe the players really respect that person, and then they take off, which would actually be that would make me so mad as Bud Black if that happened. Like, really, you hated me that much that you just couldn't win with me? You won with the new guy?
So the Rockies winning percentage is it looks like 154 as of uh this moment. Uh in the modern era, that would be the lowest. 1901 to present, that would be the lowest by far. The Philadelphia Athletics had a 235 winning percentage in 1916. If we uh extend a little further back before you know the automobile was commonplace. Uh, we've
Oh
got
boy.
in the 1800s, the worst belongs to Nate's very own Cleveland Spiders.
Oh yeah, so a fun story about that Cleveland Spiders team. Because this was the 1890s and business practices were different back then, the owner of that team also owned the St. Louis Browns. So anytime, yeah, there was at that time you could own two different teams. So any good players on that Spiders team were immediately traded to the Browns for whoever was struggling for the Browns. So even when some players
Oh my
started to
gosh.
heat up or had a good week, they'd just be shipped out. They were essentially a farm team competing at the major league level.
You know what makes that even funnier is I'm seeing on this list uh other worst teams. The 1980 or 1897 St. Louis Browns, 221 winning percentage, and the 1898 St. Louis Browns with a 260 win percentage.
Oh
So even
dear.
with that, no, they still sucks.
Yeah, that's not great.
But
That's
the
amazing.
but the Rockies are on pace to surpass the Cleveland Spiders in terms of winning percentage.
Yeah, 'cause at least they
Literally,
don't have the excuse of being a farm team for another major league organization.
Yeah.
jeez. Well, uh, speaking of some of the worst teams, so real quick, we will just go down the list of other games that have something interesting. It looks like the defending champion will finally get back on the board here with an explosive, huge game against Coach Viraj. And this actually, if the projections hold, this will be Coach Viraj's best week, funny enough. But unfortunately, he ran into the defending champions. And unfortunately, on top of that, this is the week where they finally broke their slump. So very, very sad for Coach Viraj. Uh, but this should bring Matab to 2-5. And if this is when he starts to turn it around, we should probably all be scared. It looks
Yeah, I
like
don't want to
he
go
is.
against anyone who's scoring 700 points practically.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
he actually, uh, like I said, four game losing streak, but he's gonna win this week. He's facing off so he had been the second worst team so far. He will face against the worst team so far, Coach Rachel, next week. And then when he's done with that, then he comes around to your neck of the woods state. As he faces off against you.
Oh, well, I got to get through Andrew next week first.
Oh, you two are facing each other. Well, well. Now, Andrew, your team has also run into some struggles lately. It looks like you will lose this week against Nick. And then going against another strong team in Nate. Have you made the necessary preparations?
uh we shall see. It's not been a hot start for Scott's Tots this season, and we're starting to reach the point where there's not a lot of room left for error. Um, you know, we're gonna have to start turning it around. I'd say it's I don't think it's early anymore. I'm gonna just say that officially it is not early in fantasy.
But we're not at the point. It's not getting late fast yet.
It's
It's
not late.
just
I don't think it's late, but it's also not early. So
I believe after
um,
this week, we'll be about 1/3 of the way through the season.
yeah, so that makes sense. So if teams are gonna turn it around, like Coach Matab, now is when you need to start doing it.
indeed. It looks like. I mean, we'll see how this continues on. It does seem like that cutoff is going to be at 500. So remember, we had this year, the we expanded the playoffs to a seventh team, and the playoffs start a week earlier so that the sixth and seventh seeds have a 1 game playoff basically. So when I count down the standings to seventh, doing the math for who's playing right now, it does seem like it'll be like whoever's 11-11. So like 11 wins is what you're hunting if you at least want a chance at making the playoffs. Now that could change. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But that's what it is right now. So your job is to get to 500 at least.
Yep. Just like real baseball, you can't win a division before Memorial Day, but you can certainly lose it.
And I'd say 500 is pretty manageable for most teams that are still in it. It's not insurmountable.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. If you're curious about your futures, though, you can all click on league or hover over league and then schedule, which would bring you to your team's schedule, and then you could scroll down and take a peek at your future. Maybe even a peek at the end of the season to think about like how things are gonna end. For example, for I'm on Matab's page right now. He ends the year against Nate, me, and Show, and then Andrew. And I tend to believe in you, Andrew. So I'm going to consider you a tough opponent. So that's 4 tough opponents in a row, right, for Matab. So even more reason for him to correct things right now than wait to the end.
Good teams beat bad teams.
true wisdom from Scott's Tots. So all right, so that's our fantasy matchup breakdown. Very curious who will end up coming out on top on that Jamie versus Eric matchup, which I don't think has moved since last I looked. I'll take a peek real quick. And yep, they both look, it's basically unchanged. So gonna come down the wire for that. We can now move to our IRL baseball topic. Now, we talked about a bunch of teams that are like even you, Nate, you're trying to make this great comeback right now with your two pitchers who are starting this evening. So we're going to discuss, as a fan of your team, can you take away? Actually, you know what? I'll let you introduce this. This was Coach Nate's topic, so I don't want to take his thunder. Bring our IRL baseball topic to light here.
Thanks, Will. So let's set the scene here. When you root for a team that has not won a World Series since the Harry Truman administration, you need to find ways to enjoy the sport. Because if you are living and dying just by championship or bust, that's all quite literally generations of people who have suffered nothing but misery. So sometimes you need to find joy in defeat. I know there's no such thing as a real moral victory, but sometimes you have to, just really appreciate and enjoy the stories of those going on around you. So that's why for this week, I wanted to bring up the topic of can you or can other franchises or fans, do you guys have moments where maybe it was a game that your team lost, it was a playoff series that you lost, so maybe you won a really fun game within that series but lost the series, or maybe it was even a playoff game you lost but had an incredible moment in it. Are there examples of moments that you guys really enjoyed and you thinking on it fondly may not be the best phrase because ultimately you did lose that game or that series, but some of those enjoyable moments that exist in some of the more difficult moments in your franchise's history.
Yeah, I mean it's a very good point, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. And then I think a lot of it is context dependent. In 2016, my Red Sox went up against your Guardians, then Indians, in the playoffs, and if I recall correctly, that was a clean sweep in the division series.
That it
Um,
was.
so in situations like that, um, yeah, obviously expectations play a huge role. Um, it's hard to find something to take away from, but definitely in other situations, I can think recently back in 2018, it was game 3 or 4, I believe, of the World Series, and it was about an 18 inning or so marathon, and Nathan Eovaldi um, pitched about 6 innings or so in relief, um, and the Red Sox actually lost that game, but uh, to a walk-off home run. But most Red Sox fans actually look on that game and Nate's performance pretty fondly because that's, you know, eating all of those innings and saving the bullpen for the next games was in part what allowed them to uh, win that series. So, you know, for the most part, Red Sox fans actually look pretty positively on that. Uh, what was ultimately a losing performance.
I actually watched every single inning of that game. I was hanging out with a couple buddies. It was a
It went pretty
weekend.
late.
Yeah, we were up very late because we kept thinking, "Oh, well, it's got to be over soon." We don't want to miss the end of the game. And specifically, they ran out of commercials to cycle through, so they just started doing the same set of commercials, and we felt like we were in a fever dream. And of course, we were exhausted. But yeah, that was a fun one.
And I just remember too, sure, like the fans out in LA were like, "Oh my gosh, it's so late. It's almost midnight." And meanwhile, having as an East Coast fan, having viewed the pre-pitch clock Red Sox Yankees, slugfest marathons, I was like, that's nothing. Staying up till midnight, you guys have it easy.
So,
Mhm.
Andrew, were you able to stay up through the whole game? Do you
I
remember?
I was, yeah.
So do you remember, like were you able to be happy at all? Like, was it like even losing, like, relief, like, at least it's
Yeah,
over?
yeah, I mean, it's and I don't feel like this is a revisionist history. I think the only thought I had in that moment was like, wow, Evaldi like really just put it all out there. Like that is the type of playoff performance that you dream of your players being able to, you know, put it all out on the line for the team. And I think that was the sentiment in the clubhouse as well. It was like it it just didn't feel as down as you would think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been thinking about this. I mean, our losses tend to be crushing, miserable playoff exits, and maybe that's a distinction. Like in the regular season, you could probably go game by game. Maybe you care about if like that specific 3-game series, but probably it's just your thoughts stay on that one game. But in the playoffs, you probably care the most on whether you won or lost that specific playoff series. So if I I feel like my answer is no, like I do not think fondly back on a series when we lost that series. And then the opposite, like if I won the series, now I could think back at a horrible moment with at least at least I'm not miserable about it anymore. I'm not gonna like be happy about it.
I think expectation though plays a huge role as well. Looking back at like the 21 playoffs, for example, um, the Red Sox went pretty deep there, and they didn't win the division. The Rays won the division, and they had to go through a wild card game against the Yankees. But they managed to beat the Yankees. They managed to beat the Rays, and took the Astros to 6 games. When I think most people did not expect them to go that far. Um, it also helps. You know, it's not pre 2004 anymore. Um, in Nate's case, I have to imagine to be losses like 2016 are far more crushing, given that you haven't uh reached the summit yet.
Yeah, so to that
Like,
end, I think
I
2016 really was a perfect example of I really got into baseball in 2007 and established Cleveland, as my team. And that year, they had a 3-1 series lead in the ALCS before blowing it to Boston, who then went
I
on to win the
remember
World
that well.
Series. And then they didn't go 500 again until 2013. So for 6 years, it was a nightmare, of just not doing well, watching all my favorite players get traded or hurt. And then we made a wild card in 2013, but lost the wild card game. And then 2014 and 15, weren't that great. So 2016, 10 years into my fandom, was the first serious deep playoff run. Of course, winning the pennant, making it to the World Series. And, you know, at this, my first year watching baseball, obviously I didn't have the same understanding and in-depth knowledge of the game. So I would say, like, really, this is the first true playoff run, as a fan that I can remember. So part of it was that whole World Series, we had 1.5 starting pitchers. We had Corey Kluber, we had Josh Tomlin, Trevor Bauer sliced up his finger, which, I have all kinds of opinions on him, but we don't need to discuss that today. Um, you know, um, Danny Salazar was hurt, Carlos Carrasco was hurt, um, Michael Brantley was hurt on the offense. So somehow through, you know, incredible bullpen usage, the way that Tito used Andrew Miller, I think really started to revolutionize the way that relief pitchers are used now, in some instances. Um, and just a lot of it, like we weren't favored to win any of the series, even against the Cubs. They won, it was like 98 games or something like that year. So they were the heavy favorites going into the World Series. And it wasn't until we were up 3-1 that it really kind of set in that, oh, hey, we might actually win this. So obviously, the loss was devastating. And I think back of 2016 as oh, we were so close. I really wish we could have done that. Carlos Santana, who was, of course, back for the third time. But at the time, he was there, win one for Michael Brantley, who deserved one. Jose Ramirez was young, Francisco Lindor was young. So it really was just kind of that perfect timing. Um, but there is one moment from that World Series that I, despite losing, still remember the joy that it brought me. And I refuse to let the loss of the series, take that joy away. I'm always going to remember that insane moment. And that was Game 7. We were down, I believe it was 5-1 or 6-1, before starting to come back in that game. And in the eighth inning, Brandon Guyard hit an RBI double to make it we were down 6-4. And then Rajai Davis, some of the fewest home runs on the team, going up against Aroldis Chapman, who hadn't allowed a home run since like July, choking up halfway on the bat, fouls off pitch after pitch before driving that game-tying home run to left field, and just the whole place went bananas. I was watching the game. I was a senior in college, watching the game, and I almost blacked out from pure enjoyment. I'm just like the excitement in that moment, just freaking out. I had a Gatorade bottle that I just tossed across the room. I think a lot of my college friends, they weren't watching the game, they were watching me throughout that World Series.
Sure,
Um,
yeah.
so that was just an insane moment. And again, I know we went on to lose, and people forget that we had the tying run on base, in extra innings. The Cubs had scored 2 in the 10th, and we scored 1 in the bottom of the 10th, and then had the tying run on base, but unfortunately just ran out of bench players, and Michael Martinez had to bat in the bottom of the 10th inning with the World Series on the line. Um, so
It's
that's
crazy that that played
yeah,
out that way before the extra inning runner, the ghost runner, because that's I expect 2 runs in the top half, 1 run to happen now because we get the free base runner. But that
right.
happened just naturally.
Yep. And it was funny if it was Rajai Davis on base again. We were down 2, and he drove in a run to bring us within 1, and he was the game tying run on base. But again, I think back to 2016, and obviously disappointed that we lost, but I don't view that as a negative season, in big part because, Andrew, what you were saying with those expectations. We were not expected to win the division that year. The Royals were coming off of back-to-back title or back-to-back pennants and a title. So they were the heavy favorite going in. So the fact that we won the division, you know, beat Boston and Toronto when we weren't favored in either of those series, and really pushed a juggernaut Cubs team to the brink. I still view that as a successful season compared to what expectations were. Um, as opposed to maybe a loss like 2017, I still remember the win streak from that year was incredible and a lot of fun. And then when they blew a 2-0 series lead to the Yankees, I did not enjoy that playoff series, when there were far loftier expectations that season.
Well, and like you said too, like the moments of joy being real. If you get swept, then it's like, yeah, you didn't have any moments to really get excited about. And I think about, the series was before all of our times, but uh 1975, Game 6, Carlton
Mhm.
Fisk, and that is iconic. And I'd have to imagine, for uh, the Red Sox fans who were around for that, despite the fact that they lost that series, there's still positive memories of Game 6 versus, uh, series like in, '86 where it was just you didn't necessarily have that moment, and then you also had, um, you know, the disappointment of the crushing defeat in Game
Mm.
6.
Tell people I think
I
that's
think
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Will.
I think you're both right about the expectations because my expectations, in fact, is actually I need another word, not expectations. It's like even if you are a bad team, like you are the Yankees, so you're no matter what you're expected to do well. So that's pressure on everybody. That's pressure on the general manager too. Uh, like this 2025 constructed team, like I personally do not have confidence in them as a playoff team. But if they were to lose in the playoffs, like I'm still gonna be just as upset because I don't like you don't get any years off if you're the Yankees. So I have a very different mindset going in, and usually that means that a a series lost, like, wipes out all my happy memories from that series. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, that means, like, this year we made the World Series, and especially the way that ended, the 5th inning from hell. And nothing I can't enjoy any other part of that World Series. Even game 4, on the verge of being swept out of the World Series, we actually have a crazy game, Volpe grand slam, everyone's happy, but I can barely remember where I even was. Like it's just devastating. But the previous 2 series, those to me are those are not as they're not really tainted by that. So I think if there's a gap between series, that that happiness, so the happiness in the championship series or the division series, those can survive the thing. But like every single time we lost to the Astros, like all the good stuff we did are almost completely wiped out by us losing. Maybe 2017 because we did have like back-to-back crazy comebacks, but then we get crushed in game 6 and we lose in game 7 in Houston. So that's not great.
Well,
Uh
and that's where I think expectations goes even beyond just pure, like, in a vacuum, looking at the team on paper. It's organizational and franchise level expectations, you know for a team like the Yankees where, they got the 27 rings and all that. It has been, a couple years now since your last championship, but still, uh, you know, when you've won that many, um, coming up short, you know, it makes sense that it might not be as fulfilling as it would be as, if you haven't, reached that point. But the flip side might be that, for, a Guardians fan like Nate, when if and when you do finally reach that point, the catharsis, has to be unrivaled.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know when it happens. Hopefully in my
I mean,
lifetime.
I was gonna say, you can ask a Cubs fan, but is that too soon?
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's funny, my roommate and best friend in college, diehard Cubs fan.
oh boy.
So, he would go over to his girlfriend's to watch the game, and I would stay at our apartment to watch the game. So that was we drew the line. We're like, we hate each other for this next week, and then we'll be friends again. Um,
You I think like if like to be fair, I wasn't like watching with the developed baseball mind yet, but Aaron Boone sends us to the World Series in 2003. But we lose to the Marlins. The Marlins beat us. But if anything could survive the tainting of a failed season, like that feels like something. That feels like
Mhm.
and probably it but even then, I think it had to be the Red Sox. Like, it's not good enough for that to happen to, like, some team. Like, we beat the Red Sox that way. So that but you know what's funny? I was talking to one of my other Yankees fans friends, and he said that it's not a f that that moment has been tainted for him, not because of a failed season, but
Mm.
because of Aaron Boone being blamed for 8 failures of a season, and now he does not enjoy watching clips of the Aaron Boone walk-off because of what's happened the last 8 years, which made me
Well,
laugh.
and not to, like, the other thing about that is, the Red Sox had a pretty unique, um, most teams when they suffer a loss like that, kind of like, the Guardians in 2016, like that's it for quite some time. Like it's going to be years before they can reach that point again. It is so difficult to get to that point, and just because you reach that point doesn't mean that next year you're just going to run it back. But the Red Sox did. They ran it back and they won in 2004. And, the fact that the Yankees didn't win in 2003 and the Red Sox did in 2004, uh, really, you know, obviously, there's no love lost between Boston fans and Aaron Boone. Um, but I think that wound uh, would have cut even deeper if it was, if they didn't go back the next year and win it all.
Yeah, it's tough. And I guess beside I mean, we it's obvious that the most emotional parts of the playoffs, so that's what we've been talking about. But I'll give some credit to the regular season too. For a regular season, like, awesome moment, that can survive pretty well as long as, like, A, probably, like, something horrible doesn't happen the very next day, let's just say, or at least, like, this is in my world. Like we were a playoff team, then I'm good with all the great moments of the season. When we're not a playoff team, like all the happy memories of the regular season like disintegrate. And that happened as recently as 2023. What I remember 2023 is Judge breaks his toe or whatever in Dodger Stadium, and we have a miserable like time the rest of the year. Even though I'm sure I could find like this many walk-offs, this many comebacks if I went to search, but they're all gone. They're all deleted from my brain.
Yep, so I'll also look at 2023. That was a but we had a great, made the postseason in 22, made it again in 24, but a little dip in 23. From the regular season, Jose Ramirez got in that fight with Tim Anderson. We lost that game 5-1 to the White Sox. I don't care that we lost. We won the fight. That was the real thing I wanted to win that day.
I guess that's another perspective. Like, if like, do you remember? Like, was that in the middle of the season or towards the end of the
It
season?
was
Beginning of this?
August where we were on the fringes. If we had some big hot streak, maybe we could have worked our way into the wild card picture, but things were starting to trend down. But we
Gotcha.
won that fight, so
Because hypothetically, if you're at the point where you're not hopeful for the playoffs anymore, I would think it's easier to
yeah.
consolation prizes. Like let's get this moral victory that or whatever or
Mhm.
like
I think another
like I
example, speaking of recent playoffs, was just back in, this last season, the ALCS again, between New York and Cleveland. Yes, it was a 4-1 series, which is not a close series at all. But a lot of those games, especially from game 2 on, were incredible nail biters back and forth, between both teams. Both teams getting leads, both teams having comebacks. So, of course, for me, I think of the John Kenzie Noel Big Christmas game tying home run in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, and game 3, followed by David Fry's walk off the next inning. Um, which was just electric, seeing that happen. So I think very positively about that. But again, we had very low expectations going into 2024. Um, We knew that we were facing a stronger roster, in the Yankees in 2024. Um, and even if we had managed to somehow win that series, we'd be going up against the Dodgers, who also had a stronger roster than us.
Sure, or the
Um,
Mets. Mets could have won
yep.
that series.
No, that would have been interesting because myself being a Cleveland fan and Shannon being a Mets fan, that would have been a divided household. Um, but so yes, we were watching
Got me.
those games very closely. Um, but yeah, so I wouldn't say that 2024 was like, oh my goodness, I love it, one of my favorite seasons ever, but I still think back to it very positively again because of that expectations, because we
Yeah.
had a very iconic playoff moment, um, in a game that we won that's going to be remembered for a long time. Um, so
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
a good point. Like, I think a lot, seasons exist on a spectrum in terms of like how you feel about them. I think you can feel positively about a season even if it's not like obviously every season that doesn't end in a World Series is technically a failure, but
Mhm.
if you come out of every season just being negative, 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 then it's like I don't know. For me personally, that would be exhausting.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would give up their fandom if that's all it was. So I think it's a sliding scale. You can be net positive even if it's not peak positivity.
I could tell you many of my fellow fans are exhausted up here and then by your metric.
Well, I can count on one hand the amount of tears that will be shed for Yankees fans by opposing fans.
I guess the nuance from New York is that you you are expected to field a team and perform like a team that can win a World Series. Like someone would be willing to bet money that you could win a World Series. So that's a little bit below that you're expected to win it. So there's a little bit of a gap there. But often that criteria is not met. And so when our season ends, there are many fingers pointed at who is to blame. But that is different. I think there's also like season success and season failure, and just like do the can the happy memories survive the season. So like I can remember the happy moments of a season, even if we don't win the World Series in that season. But I admit, like in terms of like the vibes of the entire season, if you don't meet that criteria I mentioned, they're often negative vibes.
So I think it just goes
Meanwhile,
to show. Oh, go ahead,
no,
Andrew.
you go ahead, Nate.
Say, I think that just really goes to show how, yeah, different fan bases may have different perspectives based off of their history and what they need to have to be able to cope with not winning in quite some time.
Yeah, because most fans and most teams don't win most of the time.
Like just put in perspective that Brian Cashman enjoys bragging about the fact that it's been 30 years since we have had a losing season, period. So having less than 81 wins.
Hmm.
Now he gets flamed for that because we're like, we're not asking for being over 500, we're asking for winning the World Series. But it means it's been quite a long time since we've been awful, like never in contention from the beginning. Even the couple of times we don't make the playoffs, it's been like maybe you might be able to see it coming, but technically, like there's a series of events that could lead you to sneak into the playoffs. It's
Uh,
been decades since we've had no chance at all to make the playoffs.
Now that does sort of raise an interesting question, and I think the answer might depend on which team you're a fan of. But if you had the option of, um, and I'll just make up odds here. Say you could have you could trade 4 seasons of like fourth place in your division or lower for one season where you had like a 60 or 70% chance of going all the way. would would you take that trade of, 4 seasons of just, like, pure misery, no chance of doing anything meaningful, uh, for a real shot at it? Or would you prefer to have, most seasons be you're definitely gonna be good, um, but not necessarily the highest odds of going the distance?
I mean, I want to matter. Like I would hate the feel. It was bad enough in 2023 when even though we were not as bad as your hypothetical saying, like just looking at the team, we were like, "Oh no, there's no hope. Like it's just not going to happen." And it didn't happen. Especially like even if we do make the playoffs, it's not going to happen. But technically you can math your way out of this. Like if you said you can be a good team every year, but have 0% win the World Series, and of course, I'm not gonna take that. But as long as there's like a as like a reasonable chance, like I think I'd like to. I want to matter every year. That's kind of
And
my
that's why I sort of put odds on it because I think if you say it's the guarantee to win, then I would guess that Nate would trade 4
yeah.
4th place seasons for 1, you know,
So
championship in a heartbeat. Or good correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that's where you're at.
Yeah, I just need to see one before I die.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a perfect example of talk to White Sox fans, Marlins fans. They've won World Series in their lifetime. Um, would they be willing to accept in the course of that 30-year span, say that the Yankees haven't finished under 500, the Marlins have won 2 World Series, the White Sox have won 1, but as a whole, people don't think of them as strong, dominant teams that have performed well, in that span. So that's tough. Would you take the one because you've got one, flags fly forever, um, versus being relevant like the Yankees, the Red Sox for the most part, in the last decade or so, maybe the Astros.
like surely there's a number when you would. So like let's say you win the World Series in year 2000, like and flags fly forever, as you said. But there'll be a number of years eventually where you're like, all right,
Yeah.
good this been like maybe that's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But
Well,
that's at some point.
and let's be real here. While the flags do fly forever, if you didn't see the flag get put up, it doesn't mean as much. It just
Absolutely.
it just doesn't. The Yankees have 27 rings, but I mean, Will, you've experienced one, and I think that probably means a lot more to you than the rest of them, maybe combined.
Now, granted, that is true. The Especially the Yankees who so often speak of their history. The fact that I grew up seeing the players of the 90s championships still on the team, that does help. So even though I wasn't there to watch those World Series, like Jeter and Rivera and Andy Pettitte, Posada and Bernie Williams, like they were actually there. So it's like, oh, these are the guys. That felt cool. But like every championship before that is basically meaningless to me. And like if my brother was a Yankees fan, then none of those would mean anything. Like that little extra gap would mean he barely sees those players at all. So yeah, you definitely need to see it. I mean that's 100% true. And then I just and I gotta complain. It just the fact of the matter is, like I haven't seen a White Sox type of team ever, never ever in my entire lifespan. I haven't even heard like there's not even like legends of Yankees teams like that. It's too long ago for me. So I do not know. I don't know how I would like survive that season. What will be my emotions?
Well, I have fortunately only one season of experience with a
The
absolutely
Valentine season.
well, that was bad, but I'm thinking even more recently in the season that doesn't exist and never happened,
Yeah.
Oh,
2020. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, those are pretty unique circumstances. Um, but that was a season to forget, and I I don't know how much I watched that year. It was it was pretty unwatchable, and I can't imagine, because you guys have a feel when you sit down to watch a game, and it varies from season to season, but there's certain seasons where you go into a game on any given night and you think, "We have a reasonable chance of winning this game." And then there's other seasons where you're just like, I don't know how we're gonna do it. I I don't know how they're gonna pull it off." And to go through that year after year after year, uh, that's tough.
I don't know how we would do it because this is not just like losing season. This is a White Sox season, a Rockies season that we're talking about here. From beginning to end, no hope, no chance.
Like, if you sit down to watch a Rockies game this season, for any Rockies fans slash masochists who are out there, I mean, you have to be going into every game every night being like, well, I don't like our chances. And that's, I don't know, even for mediocre teams, which frankly is quite a bit of the American League at this moment, you'll go into most games thinking like, well, there's hope. We might not be favored, but there's hope. And, you know, I don't know. I
Yeah.
I I
Well,
don't know how Rockies fans are doing it right now.
we'll go find one in the wild and then to get back to you. So in conclusion, so to your question, Nate, for me, it's it is quite difficult to bring back the happy moments in a series I
Well,
lost, but it is possible, like for other moments earlier in a postseason or in the regular season, as long as we like actually my Yankee specific criteria is fielded a World Series caliber team and performed like a World Series caliber team. And now if those criteria are not met, then then all moments are probably erased. Period. And then I think for everyone else, like in general, it's like very context dependent. Like what were the expectations and how did we do relative to those? And if it's a good ratio between them, the happy moments survive. If it's a bad ratio, the happy moments get deleted.
and
And
how
yeah,
spectacular was that happy moment too?
that's
Just
right. That's
just
right.
just
The
winning a
magnitude
game is
matters.
not, it
Mhm.
has to be something, like a massive game tying home run or a walk off or something that really stands out and really sparked joy in that moment.
Absolutely.
Indeed, indeed. And to your question, Andrew, I definitely feel like it's what I said. I I have this desire and urge to be relevant, and I have anxiety about being irrelevant, as that has never happened to me.
I will say I tend more towards that as well. I think seasons, they're so long. The seasons where there's not a lot of hope, especially as you get into August and September, you know, it's like, okay, well, what am I doing with my time here? Yeah.
Hey, real quick before we wrap up here, you mentioned 2020. Either of you got an issue with the Dodgers World Championship, or is it
Issue
totally
is
square?
not the word I would use.
Yeah, I think they competed under the same, um, stipulations that every other team did. So, every team had to face that same, set of criteria, and they accomplished it. So I think in the context of winning the World Series, they did what, everyone else did. Now, I'm sure you could talk to Dodgers fans, they're very happy that they won 2024 because that maybe helped them feel like that legitimized that.
Yeah.
But hey, I would have taken a 2020 ring, if that meant
Sure.
that we got one on the board. So, but I give it a it feels different.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's fair, it's legitimate, but it's also not the same as the others.
Mhm.
It just isn't.
So you won't you if you hated the Dodgers players, you wouldn't chant like fake champions to the
Um, Not fake, but I might say Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
It was very real, but it was also it wasn't a full season.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of them who were on that team also won it again in 24. So there's not too many people. I mean, unless you
Yeah.
really hate like I'm I don't know, Josh Reddick or someone I'm trying to think of who maybe was on the team, then there's not now.
Was he on that one? Wow, forgot about
He may
that.
have not. I just came up with a random name.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people go through the
Justin
Dodgers,
Turner.
so I wouldn't be surprised. Awesome. Well, Mr. Nate, thank you for joining this week. A very interesting topic you brought here. So thanks a lot for that.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you inviting me and had a great conversation.
Now, do you have any statements you'd like to uh, let all of your competition in the fantasy league know?
Oh boy. Well, I wish everyone the best of luck, except when you're playing me. And I'm hoping to finally, break through the echelon of getting past the first round of the playoffs, and hopefully maybe for that second round as well. Um, and we'll just keep plugging along.
Very well said. Unlike our last guest show, who basically flipped off the whole league and with his words.
Uh, I'd be disappointed if he did anything else.
Very on
But,
brand.
but all right, everyone. Thanks again for joining this week on the RtG Baseball Podcast. Tune in next week. And until we speak again, ciao.
Every swing's a chance to take control on the road to glory, where legends are born, fighting battles, archers